Well, hello there, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. I say that all the time because that's the way I would start my own open mics that I would run. But I am doing these readings now in honor of an open mic that I didn't run. One that was run by Tom Woodruff, another transplant for Austin, Texas. He's originally from Australia. And he would do a first Wednesday's reading at Half Price Books on North Lamar. And I always enjoyed going by there and doing round-robin readings of new book releases from Scarce Publications. So, heartbroken that stores are closed and quarantine is still in effect for the pandemic we call COVID-19. Because of that, these open mics cannot be running, but in honor of them, this is not the open mic. I am doing this in honor of Tom's open mic. That is the only thing, because I loved being able to share poetry and books like this with people at a bookstore with lots of books behind me. So I thought I'd sit in my library with lots of books behind me and share with you a couple of poems, maybe only 3, because the first one's really, really long. But there is a cc&d collection book of January through April 2021 issues. 4 issues. I think it's only 20 bucks, which is cheaper than buying 2 issues, which is just amazing. This book is called What Lies on the Other Side. What Lies on the Other Side? I will tell you that anything could be, because this cover is actually from What Lies on the Other Side. A stretch to a continuing bridge that goes out to where? I have no idea. Well, actually, this is an image of a Puget Sound bridge that was leading off to nowhere, but because it was leading off to nowhere and there was a good horizon line, I managed to get a shot from Puerto Rico, I believe, to be for the sky and the landscape behind, and it happened to be a particularly cloudy morning, so we have this very ominous cloud presence going on this whole thing as well, which is kind of cool to pull this off. So I thought I would read from maybe section 2 of this book, because there are 4 sections in here, then I'd read a couple of poems for you. The first one's a nice long one, and it's titled Fighting for Freedom on Christmas. But it's not about Christmas. It was actually written for George Washington's birthday, which was February 22nd, 1732, which is like, what? There are tiny, tiny records in here that tell you that stuff too. So this first one is just a nice long one, and you get to learn a little bit of history as well with this first poem. Is titled Fighting for Freedom on Christmas. When these guys got together and wrote the Declaration of Independence, the British Empire didn't just roll over and say, oh, okay, and let the United States of America do whatever it wanted. Just because we signed a paper saying that we chose to be free from Britain, paper didn't mean anything to the British Empire. So they were ready to fight to keep their hold on us any way they could. So, yeah, Britain came to fight, but since they were an empire and all, they'd employ some of the Hessians from Germany to do some of the fighting for them so they could cover all bases. And months after months fighting in 1776, George Washington's Continental Army was at a loss. It was approaching Christmas, and they stayed camped on the shores of the Delaware River in Pennsylvania. The Hessians, German mercenary soldiers for the British Empire, were all across the river at Trenton, New Jersey, which stopped the Americans, who were now out of munitions. So, on December 23rd, Washington brings over Hugh Mercer, a Scottish general, and Captain Alexander Hamilton, and he says, the Hessians are going to be drunk and reveling on Christmas night, so that's when we'll attack. When they least expect it. But Mercer then explained, we don't have any munitions, which is when Hamilton said, that's why we attack then, to get the munitions. Washington thinks, we've got 5,000 troops. We'll cross the Delaware. That's 300 yards. We'll get through the ice and we'll fight the British, who only have their hired German army. Christmas rolls around, and the Hessians are celebrating Christmas. And that is when separate U.S. ships set sail. Those stuck on Mercer's ship think, there's too much snow. Let's go back. All Hamilton could think was that we've got to help Washington, even though others on his boat balked, saying that there's just too much snow, there's just too much ice, it's just too cold. George Washington could only stress to everyone that we're crossing that Delaware River, and there's no arguing with a man over this one. And maybe you've seen the painting of it, but it was much grimier and dirtier than that painting could ever portray. There were 60, 70-mile-per-hour winds. Icicles are hitting their boat, made of cheap pine and probably barely holding up, and some of the soldiers had towels wrapped around their feet because they had no shoes. The Continental Army fought the ice and the snow to cross 300 yards of water to make it across the Delaware River. When they crossed, the sun had already rose. They knew that they were late. But the deadline was only in their minds. They had just survived hell. So by now they could only think, let's do this. And with that, they just walked into Trenton and they caught the entire Hessian military off guard. Washington ended up catching over 1,000 Hessians, and only 4 Continental Army troops died. Then they looked and they saw all their munitions, but added bonus, they also found a corner of stash of rum. Added bonus indeed, they thought. So they got really drunk on rum and taking their Hessian prisoners back across the Delaware River. They were falling over drunk. I mean, falling out of the boat drunk. So much for the Continental Army wearing towels for shoes. Because at this point, the Continental Army is drunk and freezing from their ice-filled river ride. So despite the pain, know that this is George Washington's first major victory in battle for his country, the country he would later lead as its first president, a man we emblazon on our dollar bills still. And now we give so much credit to anyone elected as president. But think of the battle George Washington had to fight to get to that point, which was only the beginning. It was the beginning of everything that would define not only George Washington, but also him as a fighter and a leader, and what we define as a nation. Bum, bum, bum. I feel like I need to make a noise for that, I really do. Because it was a long one, I'm only going to do, I think, 2 more, and they will be 1-pagers, poems. They won't be very long because we usually have 10-minute readings per people anyway. This is another poem I'd like to share with you that was written on the 26th of February, which is the anniversary of the publication of the Communist Manifesto, February 26th of 1848. That's another reason why wearing these glasses are handy, because it's like 6-point type with the details in this book, and that's kind of hard to read if the lighting's not perfect or whatever, so that's the only way I could read this tiny, tiny type under here. So, knowing that I'm such a communist lover, this is a poem that I wrote in honor of the state, and it's called Equality Manifesto. We have discovered that some people work hard and make a lot of money, and some say they cannot find employment that gives them the money they need to take care of their own. So we have discovered that for those who have not, against those who have, we need to make the field clear so that all can try and can achieve just above the level that of the have-nots. We are not the first to postulate a 70 to 90% tax on the ones who make far too much money for their own good. Because we are sure that even if we tax them enough to pay for the unemployed, they'll still keep on making money hand over fist so that we can keep everything running on their backs for as long as this great country can live. This money can be used to help the people who can't make enough in their service industry jobs to pay for their entire family, or even help the ones who say they cannot get a job at all. You see, this tax may seem way too much, but as strong as a hatchet, axe, and saw. But this is the only way we can make all equal. And for people who know Ayn Rand and know the band Rush, that hatchet, axe, and saw line is a quote from them in reference to chopping down trees so that all will have just enough light. You don't want to grow too tall. You don't want to get too good at anything because we've got to make everybody the same and stunt them down. So that was in reference to that one. But in honor of this, I'm going to read one more poem for you. It is not related to any date as far as I know. And it is the last one in the regular poetry section of section 2, before we get the Chicago Pulse section, because cc&d started in Chicago, so we have to have some honor for Chicago references. But this is the last poem in the poetry section of section 2 of this book, and it is titled Quickly Judged. You say you see the writing on the wall, but read between the lines, because when I make my mark, I give meaning to the spaces themselves, and sometimes I scribble more in those tiny spaces that you can't even see from afar. Even when you take my page, you read what you think you've got me figured out, but how wrong you are when you just glance at lines of text on ruled paper. You should know that I write between the lines. I even scribble on the margins. You thought it was that simple, that basic, that you thought I could be so quickly judged. But you only glanced at the writing of my life. And as I said, you never read between the lines or see the true me. While the things I write can only even possibly jump off the page. You say you see the writing on the wall, but you only glance, like life is all about only cliff notes. A private investigator might not be able to research me enough to get the true meaning. So the next time you read the writing, go ahead. Look closer. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I think 3 might be enough for you guys for this reading from a collection book of cc&d magazine from January through April of 2020 that is titled What Lies on the Other Side. Like issues of magazine, collection books are titles are based on writing within the book. There was a piece in the book that is titled this. If you'd like to know anything about it, you can go to scars.tv/ccd online. This is available through Amazon. I'm not making this a sale page. I'm just trying to share it with everybody. But you can find it at scars.tv/ccd. Just search for What Lies on the Other Side. And if anybody's interested in being a part of cc&d magazine, you could find links for sending writings to the editor for review. I hope everyone is remaining safe. I hope if you're a good little soldier, you got your shots because they are free, because that is the way to make others pay for things that we need. I know, I'm not making a moral judgment, I'm not. It's a matter of people wanting to make sure that everyone is taken care of, and I fully support that. I hope everyone is doing well. I hope everyone remains safe. And who knows, you might get one more installment of me reading during this 1 to 3 o'clock hour time period on the first Wednesdays of the month in honor of Tom Woodruff's open mic community poetry at Half Price Books. You all hang in there, and I will talk to each and every one of you very, very soon. Thank you all so very much. Thank you.